All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is the Course Development Workshop series, and today we're going to be talking about a beginner's guide to DEI. Next slide, please. We have Dr. Teresa Handy and Alaina Pascarella here to present about this topic. Take it away.
Thank you, Natalie. Hi, everyone. Today, the plan is to share the faculty perspective on Today, the plan is to share the faculty perspective on course development with an eye on equity and inclusion. The goal is to help faculty see the unseen, meaning how who we are impacts the course development process and how our unconscious biases can influence the good work we are doing. The intent is to also share some tools that faculty can use as you approach course development in a way that reflects less box checking and more of a focus on intentionality. When I was first approached about this workshop, I immediately thought when I need to have Alaina Pascarella helping me with this conversation. And I will tell you why. As much as I consider myself enlightened and aware of my own biases, I have found my work with the DEI rubric to be instrumental in my course development. So I will be joined today by Alaina, who will focus on that aspect as a meaningful tool that faculty can use to ensure equity and inclusion in their courses. Here's our agenda for today, and it goes without saying that we will leave time for questions. I want to make sure, though, before we go any further, that we acknowledge and honor the DEI rubric project and those faculty who participated on the UAGC Faculty Council. One of the first things I want to do is to clear the air, which means I want to do some norm setting. Specifically, I want you to know that I don't think anyone here has any malintent or harbors any racist ideologies. That's not why we're doing this workshop. We are doing this workshop because approaching DEI in course development can lead us down a checklist rabbit hole, and that is not what I want for any of us. What I have found when developing courses is that it takes intentional effort to create a course that reflects not only my diversity, equity, and inclusion values, but those of UAGC. So today I'm requesting that you be open, honest, and willing to be reflective so you can see how even the most well-intentioned faculty can have blind spots. I want to share with you how you can really create a truly inclusive course. As a former DEI director at a private K-12 school in the South, I've had many encounters with faculty who were fixated on ensuring that I knew they were not racist. My response to them was always that I don't think you are racist, but I want you to know that you may have unknowingly or knowingly internalized some teachings that reflect ideology that could be perceived as racist. And as long as you're willing to discuss and reflect on those ideologies and explore them with me, then I think that we were going to be fine. So I want to go into a little event that occurred at one of the schools that when I was working there. I had a 5th grade teacher who started reading a book on slavery the day after Christmas break, with no parent letter home, with no introduction to sensitive content, no explanation to the children about the sensitive nature of this content. And she presented this content to the students on that Monday. She was very surprised when parents and children, Black and non-Black, were very upset with her book choice, the timing, and also the lesson plans, which included creating a quilt with a map where the students were told to create their own map of their individualized journey on the Underground Railroad. She had an art project, including a field trip to an Underground Railroad stop in our city. And when she had a lot of backlash, one of the courses of action at the school, we decided that she would meet with me once a week for a month. When she found out that she was going to meet with me weekly to discuss the lesson and the timing of that lesson and the lack of student and parent preparation, she immediately went to the head of school and declared that she was not a racist. She was very upset, and she felt that meeting with me was going to really be negative for her, uncomfortable, and she put up quite a stink about that. She wanted the meetings to not happen, and she really was resistant. And she was a former colleague too. I worked with her as a classroom teacher. It didn't stop there. It didn't stop. The meetings went on without a hitch, though. During our first meeting, I asked her about her favorite places to travel and to eat. She was really surprised that there were a lot of similarities. And then we moved into her experiences with diverse people. And she proudly said that her family's maid was Black and how instrumental that person had been in her life. We then explored how diverse her world was. We talked about her friends and her neighbors. We discovered that her only experience with diversity with people who did work for her, not lawyers or doctors, but more like cleaners and lawn people. We talked about how those minimal experiences influenced her perspective in the classroom and her interactions with me. And I could not possibly be an expert in her eyes based on her experiences with diversity in her circle. So as you can tell, most of her experiences were not with experts of color, but more of people who are providing services. So it was really eye-opening for her, the whole experience. And each week we chatted, her eyes were open more and more. At the end of the month, she said, I will never view the news the same again, because she noticed how slanted the messaging is about who is committing crimes in our city. She also said that she would miss our time together, because what she experienced is something I'm going to challenge you to do in your classrooms, providing windows for others to learn about people different from themselves, providing mirrors that allow students to see themselves from a strengths perspective. And so I'm going to ask that you today accept and acknowledge that through your own cultural experiences, that your mores and folk ways are established by the things that you were influenced by as a young person in your childhood. And some of those influences may have had some racist ideologies behind them. Think about your school lessons where certain voices were marginalized, or incidents of inequity that you may have witnessed in your own educational journey. So let's sit in that a moment, because it's that knowing that is the first thing that you must address as you begin this process. The knowing that your personal experiences may in fact influence the messaging that you send in your classes, and the ideals that you choose to perpetuate may in fact be oppressive and may reproduce those racist ideologies, knowingly or unknowingly. So just want to take a minute to just kind of reflect on that, and as we go on to the next slide. One of the other things we're going to do is just establish some definitions of these three words that we hear a lot of: DEI, 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 right? So we want to make sure, and these are right from our own DEI rubric. So we're not creating new definitions. These are definitions that we all should be familiar with, because they're a part of the rubric that we use when we evaluate our courses. First up is diversity. Diversity refers to all aspects of human difference, social identities, and social group differences, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, creed, color, sex, gender, identity, sexual identity, socioeconomic status, language, culture, national origin, religion, spirituality, age, disability, military, veteran status, political perspective, and associational preferences. Huge. Why? I mean, and you think about that, those identifiers, we all have one or two or more of those, right? And some of us have more than others, and some of us have less. And so we want to make sure that our circle of friends and our circle of influence, when we're doing these course uplifts and revisions, that we have a broad spectrum of people around the table giving their input. I want to ask Alaina, what are some diversity identifiers that you think get lost in the course development and instructional processes?
Sure. Thanks, Teresa. I think a lot of times, much like our identity, I'm going to go to Shrek here for a minute. Ogres are like onions. People are like onions. We have layers to us and layers of identity. And a lot of times when we're talking about the online classroom, the identities that we look at are those surface level identities, those things that are immediately identifiable in the classroom. And so when we're talking about diversity in the classroom, we want to sort of get beyond that top surface level identity, and we want to look at those things that are underneath and all of those pieces that allow a student to bring their whole self to a class, as well as allowing the instructor to bring their whole self to the class. And so breaking down that diversity is not just diversity in terms of what we see, it's diversity in terms of what we don't necessarily see right on the surface. And so I think a lot of those underlying pieces, like people who are neuroatypical, cognitive ability status, disability status that we don't necessarily see, mental health issues, those things that students may bring to the classroom, that unless we get an accommodation form from the students saying that they need accommodations due to any one of those things, we don't know they are there. But we always need to be designing a course with the cognizance that those levels of diversity are there within the course and could be at any time.
Great. Thank you so much, Alaina. And next up is equity. Equity refers to fair and just practices and policies that ensure all community members can thrive. Equity is different than equality in that equality implies treating everyone as if their experiences are exactly the same. Being equitable means acknowledging and addressing structural inequalities, historic and current, that advantage some and disadvantage others. Equal treatment results in equity only if everyone starts with equal access to opportunities. You know, Alaina, this is an area I see instructors really finding the most challenge, reconciling their schooling experiences with what they are experiencing in the classroom now. For example, it's completely okay to want to have an email correspondence strategy in your course, but it's more important that the communication that you select has the appropriate tone, messaging, and images. The last thing we want is a condescending video that does not demonstrate an understanding of our student experiences, as well as our culture of care framework. Let's take instructor emailing. I never assume that a person is intentionally not addressing me in an email. I assume that they have not been asked to do so, and that their experiences may not have they have not had the experiences where they've needed to do that. So what I do is I model it for them, and then I gently remind them to address their peers by their names in their peer responses. Often those gentle strategies are much more effective than videos or announcements that make blanket statements and make assumptions about our students' ability. Finally, we have inclusion. Inclusion refers to an academic community where all members are and feel respected, have a sense of belonging, and are able to participate and achieve their potential. While diversity is essential, it is not sufficient. It is the bare minimum. The reality is that an academic environment can be both diverse and non-inclusive at the same time. The real work is ensuring an inclusive learning environment that creates a meaningful sense of belonging that is necessary for student success. So now we're going to do a quick poll. It's poll time. Alaina, take it away.
So here is our first poll with just a quick temperature check. How comfortable do you feel incorporating DEI principles in your course?
We're going to there are about 41 respondents so far. And I think that's a pretty good response rate for the group of 68. So I'll end the poll and share the results. Fail to share. Oh, did you share the results? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So we can see that I think we're preaching to the choir today. Because we have folks here that feel very comfortable incorporating DEI principles, and then we have people that feel somewhat comfortable, and we have a few that feel a little uncomfortable. So this may become more of an opportunity for you all, and we're going to have that time later when we do a little, we're going to do a little breakout room action where you all can kind of share some of your strategies and tools to that may help others feel increase their confidence level as well. So thank you for participating in that poll. And I love the hearts that I'm seeing. I feel like we are amongst friends. That's what it is, right? We are amongst friends. So let's talk for a little bit about kind of my approach to this. And I think that's what when I was asked to do this, that was what I was told to do. So I want to get into that right now. Let's all agree that we're not the course. I mean, I've said that to some people in the past, like, and I think it's Jen Robinson and I've talked about this, how I am not Gen 101, right? And so, and by this, I mean, I separate my identity from the course. And I think this is important because it increases your objectivity when you're able to do that. If you're focused on how much work you have historically put into the course, that can kind of impact your course development. I know a lot of faculty have long institutional knowledge. I know Dr. Connie Lauer on our team has deep ASH 101, EXP1, all of that information and knowledge that I don't have. And I love listening to some of those past experiences because it does help to inform our future actions within the course. But it's also nice to move beyond those constraints. And that's important because it allows you to explore the absence of voices in the course, and you'll be more inclined to tap into the needs of your students, moving away from that paternalistic thought process that sometimes guides our work. Next, never be the smartest person at the table. Bring in your associate faculty and other university partners. In Gen 101, we held a brainstorming session for our SMART goal assignment. We were struggling with, we knew there were still some pain points even after our revision. And we sought some feedback from our associate faculty for that final assignment also, which is our personal development plan. And it has been wonderful to hear their perspective and to get their understanding and their suggestions on things that they would like to see highlighted and things they would like to see us focus on to improve student learning. We've made significant changes to the templates in our course, as well as the rubrics based on the feedback from our associate faculty. The wide range of voices have also impacted our live learning sessions. So we listen to our faculty, and one of our new core faculty members, James Bond, has been just an incredible voice to, he gives us that male perspective, like, how can we make this, more appealing to our male students? And so we always want to make sure that we're aware of our own limitations and reaching out to those people that can provide us with additional information and perspectives. Gen 101 also went to student affairs because we wanted to make sure that whatever we were communicating was in a student-centric focused way and that it was accurate. My favorite phrase is early and often. So very early in the process, we engaged these different voices and we reached out to them often to ensure that our evolving course was still communicating all of the information appropriately. For example, when we wanted to revise some of our templates, we went to Alaina to make sure that we were doing so with neurodiversity needs in mind and keeping those at the forefront. Dr. Radine Sims Bishop created a framework back in the 90s, and I alluded to it earlier when I was talking about the windows and mirrors. Back in the 90s, she created windows, mirrors, and sliding doors, which related specifically to how children's literature can be used to explain how children can see themselves in books, how they can also learn about the lives of others through literature. And I assert that our students have those same needs when they enter our classrooms. Our adult learners need to see their experiences, their images, their personas in the class so that they can begin to visualize their future of earning that college degree and a career that allows them to really visualize and idealize that generational success that many of them want. One of the ways we did that in Gen 101 was to include student recordings where students could hear the stories of other students who were further down the road, and they could speak to those fears about starting college and what that feels like. It's helpful to hear those feelings normalized. And as you think about your course, think about what those roadblocks or stumbling blocks are, and then ask yourself, how can I insert a student voice that can maybe give that quote unquote, this too shall pass message in your course? Because that's really what our students need to know, that this too shall pass. They will get through this, but they need that scaffolding and that support and encouragement. And the final one is don't expect perfection. Oh my goodness, after Gen 101 was finished, there were so many places that I wanted to tweak and to improve. And I think one of the ways that I kind of reined all of those feelings in is I asked our faculty to complete a Google form where they provided real-time feedback to me and allowed me to kind of keep a database of all of those feedbacks, all the feedback they could provide. And it's been very instrumental in our next course revision. I'm happy to share that form with you all if anyone wants to look at the template that we use. It was very instrumental in helping us fine-tune our areas for our current course uplift. In our case, we focused on assignments that we revised with students we knew that certain students loved our discussion around growth mindset. That is a really big positive in our course. When you think about our live learning, students really gravitate to that conversation. And so we realized that our reflection assignment that we had really had more of a deficit mindset. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how we can correct that in our next course uplift. I think Jen Robinson had a book study that I did with her, and that was where I kind of had this light bulb moment of how we can flip that assignment in our week 2 to make it more of a strengths focused perspective. And the book that we were reading, it's called A Sense of Belonging at Work. And if any of you all haven't had a chance to read it, I encourage you to get it. This is what the cover looks like if you go to Amazon. A Sense of Belonging at Work by Lee Waller. Great read if you get a chance. By tweaking the language, we were able to improve that assignment. And so we know that our students will continue to enjoy completing that. And my suggestion is when you're beginning your course revision, pick 1 or 2 areas to focus on and do that with intentionality. And don't focus so much on the checklist or the recipe to make sure that you've done DEI, but focus more on the goal to integrate these ideals into your course. And that can be with a more nuanced approach and a nuanced process that can take some time to develop.
So let's talk a little bit about this DEI course audit rubric that's sort of been in circulation for about the last 1.5 years, almost 2 years. The rubric and its process itself. So the rubric has 9 standard areas, and we'll get into that in the next slide, that cover 29 areas of the course, or 29 criterion. And each criterion is evaluated on one of 5 categories: transforming, developing, emerging, not observed, and not applicable. And I think what I love about the language around this is it does recognize from that previous thing, no class is going to be perfect. And so this idea that we are trying to sort of get the highest score on the rubric, this is more than sort of that checkoff point to get a score on the rubric. We want to constantly be looking for ways that we can continuously improve the course. And so it's okay if that first round through you get a developing or you get an emerging. It's okay that if you get a transforming, that doesn't mean that you don't have continuous work to do. Just because you receive sort of that highest level doesn't mean that there are areas that you can't continue to improve the course and continue to embed those principles throughout your course content. And so I think that's a really important point. It's not about the score that you get on the rubric, which, coming as a teacher, using those rubrics to grade and assess student work, it can be difficult to sort of switch that mindset and make that shift. A really important part of this is doing that pre-work self-assessment. So there are some self-study questions that really ask you to look at, as a course developer, where are the areas where I could incorporate DEI, or where are the areas where it just doesn't make sense to do so, because it's going to be incorporated in every course a little bit differently. It's not enough sometimes just to throw the words diversity, equity, and inclusion in a learning outcome and think that you've covered those principles. You may not even need to have those words in your course learning outcomes in order to cover those areas, because it can be so embedded in such a positive way without specifically calling out diversity, equity, and inclusion. Next is the external review. And the external review, I think, is particularly important, especially when you look at the context of don't be the smartest person in the room. Having that extra set of eyes who is coming at the content much in a similar way that your students would be coming at the content. The reason that we ask for our external reviewer is not to be someone who teaches in your program, and preferably someone who teaches at the other college, or a staff member. Staff members can serve as external reviewers as well, is because they're coming to the content with the fresh set of eyes, the set of eyes that a student would have coming into the classroom. Students don't know anything about your content when they log into their course for the first time, and neither do these external reviewers. And so having that perspective of what a student might see when seeing it for the first time can really give you that extra set of eyes. And then finally, the post-review conference, which, as someone who has done numerous external reviews myself, acted as an external reviewer, this is probably my favorite part of the process. Filling out the rubric sometimes can get a little tedious. I acknowledge that it is a very long document. But having that conversation with faculty and brainstorming and collaborating about ways based on the evidence and the observance that you made in the course about here's what I see, here's where I think you might be able to add a diverse perspective. It can get really exciting to have those conversations in a very controlled, safe environment where everyone is treating each other collegially, and it really is to the benefit of the student. And something great that came out of the external review that Teresa recently did, I was not the external reviewer on that course, primarily because I teach the course, so I felt I was a little too close to the content. But she saw an opportunity after that initial post-review conference to invite the external reviewer back to take a look at the changes that they've made at the course based on that previous conversation before a course launches, as they're doing sort of the review process, to see if there's anything that they missed, anything that they might be able to target. And so looking at this not necessarily one and done sort of a thing with your external reviewer, having that conversation with the external reviewer and asking them, would you be willing to look at this down the road to see if we've made a positive impact or a positive change in this direction, I think is really important. So what about the rubric itself? So as I said, the rubric has 9 standards. You see them in these buckets here. These 9 standards sort of incorporate a bunch of different indicators. First, the course support components. That would be your course guide as well as your rubrics in the course. So both your discussion rubrics and your assignment rubrics. Something I've noticed as we sort of go through these, because I do look at all of the reviews that come in, there's been, some questions about the discussion rubrics. Are they built in such a way that allows us to have that DEI perspective as students are doing things? That is feedback that we can take to look at how might we improve those rubrics. The next is learning outcomes. Of course, those are not only your course learning outcomes, but your weekly learning outcomes. Can you address diversity, equity, and inclusion in those outcomes, even if it's not stated? I think a great example of that is English 225, the introduction to film class, where there is a learning outcome where students are asked to analyze and evaluate the impact of film on society. Of course, that opens a lens for DEI, because how we understand our culture and how we understand the world around us, a lot of that comes from media, particularly film, and how films portray certain topics and issues. And so looking at ways that you can then embed that and thread that throughout the course is really important. The fourth is academic supports. A lot of those are standard in a classroom. Looking at Writing Center, library, access and wellness, those links that are already embedded in the course. Are there links that we need to look at, including in the course shell, that aren't already there? Getting feedback from there. Course learning activities, your discussions, journals, assignments, and other interactivities. Looking at those very specifically on an individual basis rather than as sort of a collective. So all of the journals in the class, all of the discussions, because there might be areas of opportunity there. Formative and summative assessments, those exams, those quizzes. Is there language in quizzes that may be confusing? Bias in test questions is a hot topic and has been a hot topic since, as far as I can remember, when it comes to standardized tests and having those discussions around that. Mastery opportunities, which I think is one of the kind of the most underrated, I think, area that we don't necessarily think of, and I think this is because we are in an online environment. Are there other ways for students to show that they have mastered the learning outcomes outside of writing a paper? We tend to go to written discussions, writing papers, things like that in order for our students to demonstrate that they have mastered those learning outcomes. But we know that students learn in different ways, and students may be able to articulate their understanding of a course learning outcome verbally better than they are in writing. And so what are ways that we can incorporate giving students choice in how they are demonstrating their mastery of their learning outcomes? The learning resources themselves, looking at textbooks, articles, websites, multimedia, all of those pieces that we put in the course. Not only looking at sort of the images, which is a whole other section as we see in course images, but do we have diverse perspectives? Do we have different authors, different points of view on the same topic being expressed here? Because there is usually a plethora of being someone who loves history, looking at history, you usually have 3 or 4 different narratives about the same event. Some of them from people who have experienced it, some of them from historians who are examining those, but everyone sort of comes to that understanding in those articles using their own experience and their own bias and their own thought processes. So how can we incorporate these diverse perspectives when looking at a single topic? What are the ideas? Whose voices do we amplify? Do the voices that we amplify in the course resources, are they representative of our student body? Are they representative of the students that we see? Are we having discussions or using articles about neurodiversity that don't include people who are neurodiverse? Not, making sure that you're not having the conversation about us without us when it comes to examining some of those principles. Are we leaving out their unique perspective? I think, and that is a really important piece. So next, we're going to start looking at some breakout rooms. So do you want to
actually, Alaina, we have the word cloud that we're going to do. I just couldn't
that's
find,
right. It's the word cloud.
Right,
sorry,
I know.
I'm ahead on the slides.
Sorry, I couldn't find the bar. It disappeared on my computer. So now I'm just going to pull up the website. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try to figure out, how do you incorporate or plan to incorporate an awareness of these principles in your everyday work with UAGC students? So we're going to open up a poll everywhere word cloud, and we're just going to share with you. Okay, so now I'm going to share this again. Alaina, let me know if it shows up well. Can you all see them? Okay, perfect. So this is the word cloud. When you think of adding DEI principles in your course, where do you focus your efforts? So if you can just type in a word or two, you can text your response to Teresa Handy 763 so you would text that name, Teresa Handy 763, to this number 37607. Or you can respond to this poll. I'm going to post this into the chat. Hold on one second. And I don't know, sometimes with Zoom, you can't really cut and paste if you type in something, but try and do it if you can. pollev.com/Teresa Handy 763. I know it can take a minute for things to kind of pop up. If you're having problems, let me know.
Diana got it as a hyperlink, so people can just click on that hyperlink. Thank you,
Thank
Diana.
Oh, we need experts like Diana, don't we? We need experts.
It looks like someone is getting that it's not active.
Oh, I activated it earlier, and I guess that I'm sorry. Thank you all so much. I activated it early so I would be ready, and I guess it deactivated. Thank you all.
Oh, technology.
As people
There we go. Now we're seeing things.
Accessibility. Good.
Diverse sources and voices.
Mm-hmm. I'll let you go ahead, Alaina. Go ahead.
Perspective representation.
I love that I'm seeing multiple, various, diverse. Yes.
Yeah.
Understanding, bringing communication, images, rubrics. Yes. Anyone who knows me and knows I love a good rubric. Assignments, discussions. Yes. Forms. Mm-hmm. Prompts. Yes. Love a good prompt that allows for students to kind of pick where they fit into that conversation. Lets them choose where they feel comfortable. I will tell you in some of our Gen 101 discussions, it can get a little revealing. Students will really share some really heartbreaking stories, and it can be a little stressful sometimes. Thank you. I'm going to leave that going. While this is building up, I want to share with you all something that Dr. Holly, I'm going to butcher Holly's last name, so I won't even say it, but she shared this conference today. It's this amazing equity conference. It's happening today, tomorrow, and Friday. And Holly has said that she has been in some of the sessions this morning. I have been in 4 sessions this morning, kind of tiptoeing in and out. And they are all recorded and they are on this YouTube. And so I'm going to just cut and paste this link in here. And there are some workshops that are highlighting some of the issues that we're talking about today, which is why I think it's timely to share this resource with you. So great. Thank you all for participating in this. And I think you all can see the biggest words that are popping out are voices, images, assignments, prompts, sources, images, voices, really working on perspectives. It's so important that we really work to ensure that our students are seeing themselves in all of our prompts, in all of our discussion prompts, and all of our assignments, and that we give them opportunities to feel comfortable doing that. So now we're going to take a few minutes, and I'm going to let Alaina introduce our breakout rooms.
So our breakout rooms, do you want to reshare the PowerPoint, Teresa?
Okay, yes, I will.
Okay,
thank you.
So we have 4 different breakout rooms we're going to sort of assign randomly. Each breakout room has a CLO. These CLOs are taken from Gen 101, and breakout rooms 1 and 2 will look at 1 to 2 ways that you might incorporate DEI into the course from a developer standpoint. The other 2, looking at them, how might you incorporate DEI if you're not developing the course, but you're just facilitating the course? And how might those activities or pieces align with these CLOs? I don't see.
Diana, I'm looking for the breakout rooms too. I don't see them. Do you on your toolbar?
Hang on just a second. I'm looking.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hang on 1 second.
Okay. So what we can do if we can't pull that together, we can, so we aren't wasting, it's 3:41 right now. So why don't we just pivot and we'll just take each CLO at one time and we'll just have people put it into the chat. So why don't we look at CLO number 1, which is apply skills to promote personal, academic, and professional development. So if you were a course developer, think about what is something that you could do in the course that would help you. And basically, I'm really curious to see what other people would suggest. And so really, feel free to be as open and as honest and as you want to be with this. Using that CLO, come up with a learning activity as a course developer that would help that you could incorporate some of these DEI principles that we've been talking about today. And the first CLO is apply skills to promote personal, academic, and professional development. And just put it into the chat, your idea. Okay, yeah, that's okay, Diana, thank you. We did practice you all. We met, we talked multiple times, but sometimes things don't work out, no problem. So in the chat, just put your idea, any idea that you may have that you think would help a student master this CLO. If the CLO is applying skills to promote personal, academic, and professional development, what is a learning activity that, as a developer, that you would suggest? I know you have ideas. Identifying priorities and scheduling accordingly. So dealing with that time management piece, exactly. Creating a personal time management plan for success. I like that, Chris, because one of our biggest struggles in Gen 101 is time management. And what we've incorporated in one of our weeks is we have them to anticipate 3 events, like look ahead. What do you think is going to happen over the next 3 weeks? Some people may have, dental surgery. My mother's going into the hospital. We ask them to really sit and think about what could happen in their world. And then we ask them to come up with a strategy for that. So if I know that I have to take my mom to the hospital, for a procedure, then I need to make sure that I work ahead. Right. And then when they have a struggle with that, we really try to help them find some solutions. Okay, Bill Davis, one-on-one discussions, student and faculty engagement and dialogue. Yes, it would be great if we could incorporate some opportunities for some one-on-one dialogue with our first entry point students. That's really good. I like that. Give different scenarios based on student situations they may encounter. Yes, and Tricia, we were able to pull some of those Biz 105 case scenarios and bring them into Gen 101, and we tweaked how they approach them in Gen 101. And I think our students really do gravitate towards those opportunities where they can identify with a scenario in the class. Interview a peer faculty member and professional in the field. I like that, Chris. I like that. We have asked them to find a support group in the community. Like if you are going to be a dentist, is there a group in your community that you could join? But maybe really taking it one step into that one-on-one dialogue would be good.
An activity that discusses mindfulness. I think that can bring in a lot of those layers of identity and understanding who we are and who our peers are.
I love that. Thinking of these items broadly. I love these. Great. So now let's move into the second one, utilizing resources and tools to promote success. Once again, we're going to do this from the mindset of a developer. Utilizing, and we know we're talking about those tools that our students need in the classroom. Creative discussion allows them to consider handling. Oh, I like that one, William. So Connie, I hope you're saving the chat. You and James, let's save the chat and keep these for future reference.
I think another one with this utilizing resources and tools to promote success, giving students different ways to show like their plan, potentially like, are you outlining it in a PowerPoint? Are you doing a mind map? in
Mhm.
order to put together your ideas? Do you put together some sort of like flow chart or infographic? Do we allow students to actually create a calendar that shows
Right.
here's what I'm going to do on these days, and sort of set that schedule visually,
Mhm.
knowing that they may be a visual learner and want to see those things?
Exactly. And I hope people are seeing that these suggestions are not all, these are not just suggestions for Gen 101. If you look at some of these suggestions, they can be adapted for your course, whatever course that you're in, that you're developing, or a course that you're facilitating. All right, so let's move to the next one. And this one we're going to take from the perspective of a facilitator. Evaluate how lifelong learning strategies can promote academic and professional success. If you are a facilitator, what are some ways that you can incorporate these DEI principles? If you want a student to be able to accomplish this learning outcome, evaluate how lifelong learning strategies can promote academic and professional success. Let's see what we have. Oh, and you know what, Diana, we had Cole come and speak with our faculty last night about Folio. And we really learned about some of the other capabilities of that tool that I hope we can share with our students as well. Timeline visuals show progression. I love that. Bill, that's an amazing idea. As a kindergarten teacher, I loved timelines to show children how things progress, like even with you're talking about a butterfly, or anything. It was always nice to show children that visual, and adults need that as well. So I love that. Great. So we used to do that inside 202. Nice. A presentation assignment on how programs and research on DEI principles contribute to professional environments and to academic environments. Exactly. The research says, Ted, that if you can master these kinds of skills, and if you understand these principles, that it's profitable. It increases a company's profitability. So it's not just something we should do. It actually can generate income and profits for a company. And let's look at the last one. As a facilitator, the learning outcome is create a plan for personal growth, including career and academic development. And as you all know, in our course, that's the week 5 final assignment. But what are some other ways that you could add to that assignment, or add to another learning activity that could accomplish that same learning outcome? Any ideas that we can discuss? Perhaps it's an opportunity for a guest to share their experiences. Yes, we see so many wonderful TED presentations. Exactly. And I think we have those here with our students too, Diana, which is an opportunity for us to highlight that student voice. Have students create a reading list for the next, I love that. Discuss what they expect. These are some great ideas. Lynn said, it went so fast. Lynn said, discuss DEI policy inclusions as well as ethical concerns that need to be addressed in the practice of implementing DEI. I love that. That's a great higher order activity too, Lynn. That's great. These are fantastic. So I hope you all can see how, and so save the chat, because these are some great, this is like our own Chat GPT right now, right? We just did some ideation right here that was really meaningful, and lots of great ideas and lots of great suggestions. And so I hope we save them and think about them going forward, because this is how we create a culture that it exemplifies these DEI principles that we embrace, right? So let's move on to the next. Thank you all for engaging with us around those. And I'm glad that we were able to pivot, Alaina, from the breakout room. I liked it better as a group. I liked it better. So inevitably, the world comes into our classrooms, right? And so what happens when the world and the classroom collide? I mean, when the tragedy with George Floyd occurred, it sparked this change within UAGC, with all of the, change and the CAG group and the turn the tide. And so when the world is happening, we can't just ignore, when things are happening in the world, we can't just ignore that when it comes to our students. One of the ways that we see our students in the classroom is that we acknowledge when the world enters our classroom. For example, when there are tragedies in the world, one way is to post a Message that says, I know there are some painful things happening in the world, but I hope you will find refuge in our class. In Memphis, we had the tragedy of the young man, Tyree, who's, murdered in the streets of our city. And I'm sorry, that impacted me as an instructor. It was hard that night to just kind of pull myself together. And I just, without saying what had happened, I just said, I live in Memphis and it's tough here and it's sad here in our city and it's impacting me. And if it's impacting you, just know that I see you and I feel the same way. And that kind of being vulnerable with our students is important. And it allows for our students to see us as human. You don't have to know it all. Like you don't have to know everything about what's happening, but just being able to express empathy, just knowing that these tragedies can be extremely complex for our students. And there can be generational expectations when things happen in the community where they live, and that these, and there may be needs that they have to meet that are now their responsibility, right? And there may be grandparents in your class that are caring for grandchildren, et cetera. Many of our students come with very complex stories, but what they need is understanding. They don't need pity, right? And that's really important, not to treat them in that lens of pity, but treating them as someone who is strong and making it through a really tough situation is important. I can recall a student who was going through a tragedy, and I said to her, just trust me, you are 1 week from finishing this course, and in 6 months, you're gonna be happy that you pushed through because you'll be closer to graduation. So I mapped out a plan for her to work in her car. I gave her some ideas on how to entertain her children, and I checked in with her frequently, and I mean, late at night, early in the morning. She was surprised at 3 o'clock that I responded to her. I checked in frequently because I wanted to coach her along. I did not lower my bar. If anyone knows, I'm always about rigor here, scaffolding to support however we need to get them there. I gave her the suggestions and guidance. She later sent me an email and she thanked me for pushing her through, because she was, after the dust cleared, she was able to, the dust is going to clear, right? But she was able to have success after the dust cleared, not additional debt, but she had success of completing that class. And it's so important. So use your announcements to offer general caring messages. I use the UAGC blogs. I mean, Bill Davis has written amazing material. I use his blogs. The UAGC Hub has resources. James Bond has written a lot of articles for them. There's tons of stuff there. These are just our resources. Why not post them in our classes, use them as tools to support our students? And I use my cell phone. People use Google phone. I use email, and I love Signals. Anyone knows I love a good Signals email. Alaina, would you like to share a few strategies that you use in your class? I know we have about 7 minutes, and I think we're almost done, but if you have I know you talked about some diversity calendars and things like that.
Yes. So something that I like to do in the classroom is to sort of sometimes get beyond the content, although I do feel it's very important to be vulnerable and bring your whole self to the class. So when talking with students, anyone who's known me for any period of time, I deal with anxiety. And so talking to students about my own sort of journey as they're talking about their anxieties and things like that, so that they know that they're not alone, that this is something that happens to everyone, including their teachers, letting them see the human, real me. And doing that by infusing my voice and doing things in my announcements that sort of show my own interests and my own sense of humor. But the other thing I like to do is the diversity calendar. So the diversity calendar, which I just plugged the link in chat, that's on the AU Global Connect or the Global Connect website, as well as in the CETL. It has for each month different days that have sort of those heritage days, those things that celebrate different identities. And so posting an announcement that, today, one I did was, today is International Commemoration Day, looking at in that particular day, explaining what it is that the United Nations was recognizing victims of the Holocaust on that day, and sort of having a little discussion about these are the things that it not only affected, 6 million Jews, but also Romani people of the LGBTQ plus community, things like that. So making sure that students of different identities know that I'm celebrating their identity as well, and giving them an opportunity to have a conversation in announcements that doesn't feel like it's impacting a grade or anything like that, but allows them to bring a piece of themselves to the classroom that doesn't feel like it's for a grade. And so it doesn't have that same level of attachment or anxiety that sometimes comes with being vulnerable in something that you're graded on.
Right. So you know what? We have about, I would say, 2 minutes left, because we want to at least leave time. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. But Alaina, I'm just going to quickly go through these slides for resources. Yep. And I put in the chat, everyone get your phones out, because we're going to share some QR codes. And we're going to thank you, Roseanne, for sharing that resource. So I'm going to very quickly share some resources with you all. So the first one is the Course Development Hub that Alaina has created that has lots of resources around DEI, the rubric, workday training, additional trainings in workday related to DEI. So, and this will also be included in the PowerPoint that's going to be loaded, I think, with this presentation. So yes, we're going to share the slides. Perfect. So this is a resource. And then also we have the 21-day equity challenge. We were talking about how this is individual work. This is a great way to do that work. If you participated in Walk the Talk, we shared this resource there. Also, the Stanford Neurodiversity Project and Project Implicit Bias have lots of resources that you all can tap into and use to kind of help that with that self-growth. And then we have the National Diversity Council, the POD Network Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Resources, and the Stanford University Course Design Equity and Inclusion Rubric. So all of these are amazing resources that you all can have access to that can help support the work that you're doing. I think we can skip our poll, because I think we realized at the beginning that you all were very much in tune with what we were going to discuss today. And this is probably more of just let's just have a kind conversation amongst friends. And so we'd like to leave the last 3 minutes for questions, if you have any. Thank you all. Thank you all. You're welcome. I did not want to. Alaina, do you want to say anything in closing? I know. Oh, feel free. Yeah.
I appreciate these conversations. I just like these conversations. I don't know if it comes across, but these are the conversations that get me energized about sort of the work we're doing. And I think the more we have these conversations around this, the more we're able to incorporate DEI and get to know each other, because we all have different experiences that we're coming to the table with. And so I get a rush out of these conversations. So thank you all for indulging me in my nerdiness with these conversations.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you all for coming. It really was a joy to kind of have these conversations. And Alaina and I have worked together on, in fact, Alaina and I just wrote an article last week talking about our experience when using this rubric and our experience from where we sit. And so we have really enjoyed this camaraderie. So now I'm going to pass it back over to our friends. I think Natalie, you're going to share the schedule and everything with folks.
Yeah, thank you. Teresa and Alaina, we really appreciate you coming and speaking on this topic. Our next session or workshop will be on sparking student engagement via learning science on June 28th. If you would like to view previous presentations, those are found on YouTube and the playlist linked in the slides as well. Thank you so much.